we tend to treat retreats as rewards. Uh, you know, if since you work hard enough and long enough, eventually you get to have this kind of break. And I don't think of a retreat as a break necessarily either. The retreats that I take actually can be rather intense. And that's because retreats aren't a reward for the hard work. They're part of the work. Uh, it's not a trip. It's not a week off. Literally, I would say that that's the biggest problem in terms of the framing of this idea of a retreat. It's a reward. You get it because you've earned it. That is not the case. You just need, and you don't need to go on a trip or anything like that. Like, I don't need to go off somewhere to do a retreat. We literally, as I pointed out, did a retreat, a virtual 3-day, actually more like 5 days when you take into account the focus sessions that we do for them. We literally took several hours of a day over multiple days from the comforts of where we are, our home, like my study, whatever. So you don't have to go anywhere, but you just need to step back. And if you treat a retreat as a reward for hard work, then it puts it at the end of the effort, and it's not going to serve you as well. It's outside the work. It's contingent on having done enough. And that means most people feel that they've never really done enough to deserve one. I mean, think about it. If you've probably heard of a retreat before, or you've seen people go on retreats or describe them or what have you. And I know I felt this way, but in the back of your mind, like, well, I don't really need one. Or, well, the kind of work I do doesn't require one. That sort of thing. And I think a reframing will help you realize that a retreat, actually done properly, done well, can serve any calling, any vocation, any career. And so you need to stop thinking of a retreat as a reward for hard work. It's literally part of the work. If I go on a trip, I don't want to be working. I want to be completely removed from it as much as possible. And again, as a writer, there's always some kind of work going on in my head because there's a purpose behind it and so on and so forth. But there's an identity wrapped up in it. But there's a reason, for example, that, and yes, you could argue that this conference I'm going to next week is a work conference, so it's not so much of a retreat. But if I was going away or taking a retreat elsewhere, which I've done, I don't invite my partner and my kids or anyone to come along with me. That's not what it's for. So, this idea of the military origin of the word, again, to retreat is to withdraw in order to regroup. It's not really to surrender, but to reassess. It's a strategic move, and that's what we've lost. A retreat is not the same as rest. I've found that when I've done a really, really solid retreat, that I need a break when I get back from it. The deeper I've gone, the more challenging it's been. It's also revitalizing at the same. And there's a variety of ways you can do a retreat. I'm not telling you here how to do one necessarily either. I'm going to give you some guidance, and the PDF definitely will do that. And there's lots of ways to look. My friend Mike Schmitz has built some retreat forms. My friend David Sparks has done the same. And each of them has their own differences. The retreats that I do are built largely on the Ready retreat that I've shared with my community. I just do it all in one. I basically dedicate a day to each phase of this retreat, whereas we don't do it for as long of a time. But that's the point. And again, I want to stress that the other thing that people think about retreats that is a myth is that you actually have to go somewhere. You don't have to do that. I mean, I would argue that we've even gotten to the point where, because remote work exists now and a hybrid workplace exists now, you could, uh, the idea to go somewhere might be more appealing because you might be working from home. But if budgetary concerns are there, and they've been there for me in the past as well, where it's like, look, I can't afford to go away on a retreat. I'm just going to close my door. I'm going to block off several days, and that's what I'm going to do with that time. You don't need to leave where you are. You just need to step back. There are two kinds of retreats that I want to kind of go through. So there's retreat as place and retreat as practice. And this is important. So retreat as place is kind of like the getaway, the conference, like I talked about, the cabin. It's a physical removal from your normal environment. So this is what most people associate when they think of a retreat. It's real and it matters, but it's not always available. So it's the place where you go isn't necessarily going to be available for you at any given time, which is also part of the reason why you may not retreat. Because if you can't go anywhere, then it's not really a retreat. So therefore, I can't take a retreat, or I can't have a retreat. So we're going to break that, because retreat as a practice is where things get different. It's, a regular stepping back. It could even be a daily stepping back, to be honest. Journaling is and a reflective practice in some way, shape, or form is the form of a retreat. It's a small version of it. It's a lot like, and I remember reading the book Creative Quest by Questlove, and he talks about micro meditations. And we hear about these long, lengthy meditation sessions, but he would do like 30 seconds and just take some time. And you've probably heard of this too. I know when I've done some CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, the idea of box breathing, or like, those are forms of retreat. They're not as elaborate or as, let's say, explicit, but they can act that way. But it's this idea of stepping back that doesn't require an airfare or a hotel accommodation or a suitcase or any of that stuff. It's a protected period of time. Could be an hour, could be several hours, like we do in the Ready Retreat, could be an entire day. We actually, later this month, inside the TimeCrafting Trust community, we have what's called an if day. And what if stands for is immersive focus. And since not everyone in our community was able to do the Ready Retreat live, let's say someone in the community is watching right now, that would be an ideal day to do the Ready Retreat. If you have some other form of retreat, that's what that day could be for you, right? So it could just be an entire day. But there are different kinds of, like, a walk, leaving the house. Like, there are lots of different ways to retreat that don't have to be as elaborate, as deep, as place oriented. Quiet mornings could be a form of a retreat for you. So there are two different ways to look at this. But regardless of how long you take, regardless of the method that you use, the thing that you need to take away is that the practice is what makes the place richer, not the other way around. And this parallel could be driven towards other things as well, like apps. If you're using an app for your productivity or your to-do lists or what have you, if that app goes away, you can always find another app. But what you bring to the app, your framework, your practice, all the app is a place for it to live. People who know how to step back in a small way regularly, they're going to get more from it than the big, massive ones. And keep in mind, I think the other thing that's worth noting is when you do travel away for a retreat, and this is just a little bit of a sidebar. I think it's important that you uh, also take in some of the place that you're going. There is we love novelty as humans, so if we are in a place that we've never been before, and sometimes we go to the same place. I've done that before as well, or some place that's familiar. But novelty does help because it breaks, it can break that spell, that pattern. And so I know that when I've done retreats where I've gone to a place, I have dedicated periods of time to do the work, and then I've dedicated periods of time to get out and explore what's around. And I've been fairly flexible with the amount of time in each of those parts. So, because I've cleared my entire calendar, so you could be very prescriptive and say I'm going to spend 8 hours actively retreating and the remainder of my time exploring the area, or you could divide it differently, or you could just play it by ear and take more frequent breaks. That's the great thing about a retreat is, again, it's that meshing of practice and place. And if you're doing it from your home, definitely leaving the home during periods of time when you are taking this form of a retreat, big or small, is helpful because uh, I can tell you that I've also noticed when I'm here doing a retreat inside of here, I will find other things to do to avoid the harder work that might be associated with the retreat. That's often why people will go away, is they won't get distracted. Right? So again, this immersive kind of experience, this practice is what you're looking for. And place can give it to you. Now, summer is a natural place. There's a permission to do this because, there is this propensity that things kind of slow down. You've got holidays happening. The weather is nice. So the pressure is typically lower, lighter schedules, longer evenings, this kind of cultural exhale. Um, but the kicker is that these kind of permission structures don't create the retreat. Intention does. So going back to what I was talking about off the top, if you can't break through the bias that retreats are not rewards, but they are for work, they are part of the work, you're going to have a really hard time uh, with this permission season that we're in, this permissive season that we're in, because your intention is lacking. It's not supported by what you need. And I can tell you that we do this virtual retreat inside our community upwards of 3 times per year. And it is one of the more valuable aspects of our community because uh, there is a regular cadence to them. In fact, when people are kind of mapping out what they plan to do, because that's what the Ready Retreat is really about, it's about getting ready for the season ahead, is they will actually use the next Ready Retreat as their boundary for how far ahead they'll plan. So that way, every time they do a Ready Retreat, they do this kind of seasonal mapping of sorts. So, you can have an annual retreat, you can have a semi-annual retreat, whatever you need to do, but there are ways to do it. You just need to recognize and break past that myth that, number one, it's not a reward for hard work. It is part of the hard work. And number two, you don't need to go anywhere to do it because it's the practice that brings everything to it. The place is just essentially a container for it. So, what would a retreat look like for you for an hour? If you took an hour, just kind of do it a morning, a day, a week, maybe every morning, a morning over the course of an entire week. What is interesting is that it's the combination, and this is what being productive is. Being productive is the active link between intention and attention. And that's how you make a retreat work well, is your intention, and then the boundaries are essentially the framing. That's the attention. So if you are attending something like the Ready Retreat, those boundaries are built in for you. If you're doing it live, ergo, your intentions and attention are aligned. That's built in for you. If you do it on your own, and some in our community have had to do that, then you have to set up that boundary yourself. And there is a momentum to this kind of retreat process. So I would recommend that if you are going to look at a kind of retreat experience, that you try to make it as memorable, like as easy to latch onto for yourself as possible. So again, maybe the mornings over the course of an entire week could be, again, one entire week. It could be, I do this every Friday. And so it becomes this pattern, because the brain loves patterns. So you want to create a pattern for this. And that's really key. To kind of get into the tail end of this, there is one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have is once they break through the bias of, all right, I don't have to just get a retreat when the work is done. It's part of the work. And then, oh, okay, I could do it from wherever. It's more about the practice. The next kind of roadblock or a piece of friction is, okay, how do I do it? And so what I've done is, this is where this free resource comes in for you. So it's called the Retreat Map. And it's 6 ways to step back with intention and make the most of the space that you create. Because it's, again, if you think about what I've talked about, it's not just the time you set aside, but it's the space you create. So it's time and space. And John Cleese has this great talk about, in order to do truly great work, you need and he speaks about creative work. And there is a creative component to this. You need both time and space. If you have all the time in the world, but no space, like a container to hold it, then you're going to get drift. You will procrastinate. You will delay. If you have all the space in the world, but no time, it'll be rushed. And quality will suffer. Quality will suffer on both accounts, but you'll feel rushed if you have little time but a ton of space. Plus, you'll try to figure out what space to put it in, which then delays, and so it's equal. There needs to be a balanced measure of time and space here. So let's talk about a couple of them here, and I've got them just to give you a sense of. Let's see here. So here's the retreat map here, and I've got it on my iPad. So you can see it's just a printout right here. So I'll go over a couple of the things. So let's start with the first one, the permission problem. Most people wait for external permission to step back. Say a deadline lifts, a season changes. Someone gives them a week off, but a retreat is something that you declare. It's not something that you wait for. So there's a thing to try here. Name one thing you've been waiting for permission to step back from, and then give yourself that permission now and write it down. I would print off this sheet, or, import it into some place where you could use I've got it in preview on my iPad, but you could use whatever you want, and you can make notes on it if you want. Let's move to a scale misconception. That's number 4. A retreat doesn't require a week, a flight, or a mountain. It requires a boundary and an intention. 20 minutes with the phone in another room can be a retreat if you treat it like one. And interestingly, inside our TimeCrafting Trust community, we have what are called focus fix sessions, and we do them twice daily, weekdays. So there's an hour in each of those sessions where it's protected time. So you could use one of those if you're a member of the community or you become a member of the community. You could use those as a place to retreat, depending on your time zone, if it makes sense to you. So one of the things it says to try here is to design a micro retreat for this week. 1 hour, one boundary, one intention, no agenda. Start there. And then, of course, there's the re-entry problem is an interesting one. So that's number 5. Most retreats fail not in the stepping back, but in the return. And that's why we do the ready return here in June as well, because the return isn't just about coming back into the, quote, real world, but it's also about not losing sight of the things that you set, those intentions that you set during the retreat. That's what the ready return is mostly about, to make sure that you can course correct in case there's been some drift. And that's exactly what we talk about here. You come back and then it's immediately gone. So you come back into the world, and I've seen this happen before. I've been to events, conferences where you're immersed in the energy of the event. You're immersed in everything that's going on. And then you go back to, quote, the real world. And all of the sudden, it's just as if you never left. And there was a conference in particular that I would go to regularly over a number of years in Portland, Oregon, called the World Domination Summit. And it happened. I went to almost all of them. And other than the last year, which was disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, what I noticed is, and again, this is nuanced to a degree, because I can say that there were certain things I didn't take advantage of by going away. I would go into these events and say, I'm going to definitely do this. And I come back and get caught up in things. But for the most part, I think I did a pretty good job of kind of carrying things over from that event. But I think there were a number of people that instead of it becoming a retreat, it became an escape. And that's different. It can be like role playing to a degree, I guess. This is the life I want to have, but I don't have it. So this will be what I do for this week. And then I'll go back and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, you could argue that Burning Man is like that to a degree, right? Because there are interesting things, and I'm sidetracking here, but there are things that you assume about people, and then when you find out the things that they enjoy doing or they like to do, again, Burning Man would be. There's lots of people I know that went to Burning Man that I would have no sense that would go to Burning Man. There are lots of people that went to this conference, the World Domination Summit, that I wouldn't say I was surprised because I got to know them, but it definitely didn't necessarily fit the work that they were doing outside of it. So whether you're in that category or whether you are immersed, that's one of the interesting things about going to this KIT conference, Crafting Commerce, is for that entire week, I'm going to be immersed in not only basically in the creator world, especially a platform like KIT that I use, which interestingly, right after I'm done here today, I have to correct something that happened with KIT so again, it just highlights the fact that I need to spend more time learning this. So that this immersive nature of that is I'm stepping back from everything else so I can immerse myself in that. But I'm there a little bit longer so I can carry over the residual effects of being in that space so I don't lose sight of it. And that's the thing. When you re-enter a retreat without a re-entry plan, it's just a pause. And pauses are fine. We need to take pauses. But a retreat is not a pause. Again, if it was, then the argument, the myth that the retreat is a reward for the work would be mostly accurate. But it's not. It's a stepping back. You're still engaged to a degree, but it's still part of the work. So it's not a pause as in again, it's not an escape. So part of the practice is, and this is why the practice matters more than the place, is protecting what happened during the retreat, making sure it's protected when you bring it back. So taking notes. One thing I actually think would be interesting to try, just thought about this, would be, and we have the technology, is to film yourself during the retreat process, like at the end of every day. I think if you've been following my work for a while, you know that reflective practice is a big part of what I share. And I think that if you were to not just handwrite journals, because those are powerful, but there's something about the connection of the emotional component of when you're in that place and you're retreating, there's a presence there that you can really see with someone, and you could see it in yourself. So when you're on a retreat, maybe this is something to try, is at the end of the day, just make a short video of yourself, like a video journal, and how things are going and what you intend, and see that emotion. Like, you don't need to share it online. Just keep it to yourself. You could even just record the audio if you think that would work well. But that could be the thing to do that will help galvanize it, so that when you do come back, that you've got this greater sense of resolve to see it through. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me here today. And until next time, stop doing productive and start being productive. We'll see you later.